Can I ask you something before I tell you any of the rest of it? Have you ever had one word said about you, just the one that you couldn't set back down? Not a shouted word. Not even a cruel one, exactly. Just a tired little word said low in the next room by somebody who came out of your own body, and after that it follows you around the house like a cold draft you can't find the crack for. The word for me was burden. My name's Sharon Cottle. I'm 69 years old, and for most of those years I lived up on a hill above Pikeville, Kentucky, in a house my husband and I paid off $2 at a time, coal country. The kind of place where the mountains hold the fog till near noon, and everybody in the grocery knows your maiden name and your mother's maiden name besides. I worked 35 years behind the counter at the community bank on Main Street. Teller, then head teller, then the one they'd send the difficult customers to, because I could tell a man his check had bounced without making him feel like less of a man. I counted other people's money my whole life. Balance to the penny at the end of every single day, and I want you to hold on to that, because it's the piece that matters. 35 years and I never once came up short, not one day. Harlan passed 6 years back now. His heart. He was a lineman for the power company, up a pole in the ice, half his working life, and then one ordinary Tuesday he sat down at the kitchen table and just didn't get back up. After that, the house got quiet in a way I don't have the words for, but I kept it, kept myself too, went to church, took a casserole where a casserole was called for, did the books for the ladies' auxiliary, because Lord knows nobody else could make them balance. I've got 2 children, Beth, my daughter, down in Lexington, Danny, my boy, up in Cincinnati. And I need you to hear me say this plain, because this is not one of those stories where the family are villains. They're good kids. Nobody robbed me. Nobody was cruel on purpose. They were just busy. Grown and busy and tired the way people get when they've got their own children and their own house notes and a mother 3 or 4 hours up the road who's getting on in years and lives at the top of a set of stairs. The word came at Thanksgiving. 2 years back I was 66. The whole crowd had been at my table. And it was a good day, I thought. Then I went down the hall for the extra gravy boat, the good one, and I heard them in the kitchen. Beth and Danny, low, the way you talk when you don't want to be heard. What are we going to do about Mom, the drive, the winters, those stairs? One of them had already been sent a brochure from one of those assisted living places, the kind with a photograph of a smiling old woman holding a paintbrush. And Danny said it not mean, just weary. She's going to be a burden eventually, we ought to get ahead of it. I stood there in the hall holding that gravy boat. And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't anger, at least not the loud kind. It was more like the floor tilting. Because I have balanced to the penny for 35 years. I have never in my life been anybody's shortage. And here were my own 2 children, doing the arithmetic on me, provisioning against me, setting me down in the ledger under liabilities, the way I used to mark a loan the bank figured it might not get back. I set the gravy on the table. I smiled. I did the dishes. That's what women my age do, we do the dishes. But something in me had gone very quiet and very clear. Now, I could tell you I cried about it for weeks, and I did some. I could tell you I picked a fight, and I didn't. What I did instead, and it took me a few months of sitting with it, through a long gray Pikeville winter with the heating bill eating what it eats, is I made a decision. I decided I was not going to spend whatever good years I had left being managed. Being a problem 3 hours up the road, being got ahead of. I wasn't broke, understand. That's the part throws people. This was never about the money. I had the house. I had Harlan's settlement from the company. I'd been careful my whole life, and careful adds up. The bank taught me that, if it taught me anything. No, the thing I was short on wasn't dollars. It was being needed. It was being a person somebody was glad to see walk in the door instead of an item on an agenda. I'm going to tell you what I did about it. I'm going to tell you all of it, the good and the parts that still ache, because there are parts that still ache, and I'd be lying to you if I sanded those off. But I'll tell you where we end up, just so you'll ride along. I'm sitting right now on the far side of the world, in a green and orderly city where the air comes at you warm as bathwater, and there is a whole street out my window that calls me by a word that means grandmother, a word they gave me, not one I'm owed by blood, and I am not a burden to one single living soul. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to that winter, and a woman named Aida, and the first time I ever let myself think about a country I could not have found on a map. Ida had cared for Harlan those last months. She was a nurse's aide the home health service sent up our hill, a small, quick Filipina woman somewhere in her 50s, and she was the only person in that whole grim stretch who could make Harlan laugh. She'd fuss at him in a way he'd have taken off nobody else. "Mr. Harlan, you are being a baby now," she'd say, and he'd grin like a boy caught. When he passed, Ada came to the funeral in a good dress and cried harder than some of the blood kin, and afterwards she kept checking on me a text, a little foil plate of something with garlic and rice. So that winter, when the quiet in the house got to be too much, it was Ada I asked over for coffee, and she got to talking about home. Davao, she said. A city down south, on the big island, Mindanao. She'd say the word, and her whole face would change. She talked about a market that ran late into the night on Roxas Avenue, about a fruit so strong they banned it from the hotels, about how her mother was 88 and still ran the household and got taken to Mass every single morning by one grandchild or another. Nobody, she said, and she said it plainly, not to wound me. She didn't know what I'd overheard. Nobody back home would ever put their Lola in a home. Lola, she told me, means grandmother. I didn't do anything dramatic that night. I'm not a dramatic woman. But after she left, I got out my laptop, the way you do at 2 a.m. when the house is too quiet, and I started to read. And I'll tell you the truth of how I chose, because it wasn't romance. It was a column. I'm a bank woman. I make a table. I looked at all of it, the whole idea of an older person going to Asia to live on what she's got. Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia. Cheaper, some of them, than the Philippines, and prettier in the pictures. But I kept coming back to one column on my little table, and the header on that column was, "Can I actually talk to anybody?" Because I'll be frank with you, I am 66 years old at this point in the story. I have watched enough of my friends go foggy to know the clock's running. I was not going to move to the far side of the earth on my own, a widow, and land somewhere every word around me was a locked door I had no key to. I could just see it, me, pointing at things. Me, alone in a room, understood by no one, the loneliness I already had only now with a strange tongue sealed around it. That was the nightmare. That was the deal breaker. And in the Philippines, English is an official language. Schooling's in it. The bank's in it, the doctor's in it, the road signs, the menus, the fine print on a lease. Ida and her whole family flipped between English and their own tongue mid-sentence like it was nothing. I could be myself there. I could be funny. I'm funny when I'm comfortable. Ask anybody who isn't my son. I could argue a phone bill and mean it. At 66, being able to stay a whole person out loud, that was worth more to me than $100 a month saved in some quieter, tonal place where I'd have gone silent. So the country picked itself, and the city picked itself too because of Ada Davao. She swore to me it was the safe one, the orderly one speed limits people actually kept, no smoking in public, a curfew on the liquor, a mayor's city that ran on rules. A real city, she said, with real hospitals, not a resort. And down there on Mindanao, she said, the big storms mostly don't come. That mattered to me more than I knew yet. I heard the other thing too, understand. I read the travel advisories. There's a warning on that whole southern island, a serious one, and I read every word of it. But I also read, careful as I read a loan file, that the city of Davao itself is carved out of it, held to the same level as Manila, as Cebu. Ada just laughed when I asked her, gentle. "Ma'am Sharon," she said, "it is safer than where you watch on your American news. I decided I'd go see for myself before I believed anybody, her or the internet. Now, I didn't sell the house and burn the boats. I'm not built that way. 35 years in a bank does not produce a woman who bets the farm on a feeling. I did it the careful way. I booked a scouting trip. 3 weeks, I told myself, to go look with my own eyes, walk the streets, price the groceries, sit in the heat and see if I could stand it. If it was wrong, I'd come home, and no harm done but the airfare. I did tell Beth. I sat her down and told her I was flying to the Philippines to look at a city to maybe live in. There was a long quiet on the line. "Mom," she finally said, "is this about Thanksgiving?" And I said no, honey, which was maybe the first real lie I'd told her since she was small. It was entirely about Thanksgiving. It was about a gravy boat and a word in the next room. The morning I flew out of the little airport, then Atlanta, then the long haul over the pole, I was 66 years old and more scared than I'd been since the day they handed me a newborn Beth and sent me home from the hospital with no idea what I was doing. I sat by the window somewhere over the Pacific in the dark, and I thought, Sharon, you have lost your entire mind. Then I thought about that brochure with the smiling woman and the paintbrush, and I ordered the little cup of wine, and I kept flying. They open the door of the airplane in Davao, and the country walks in to meet you. That's the only way I know to say it. I'd been in that dry, canned airplane cold for the better part of a day, and then they cracked the door at the top of the jet bridge, and this wall of warm, wet air just leaned into me, thick as a wet washcloth over your face, smelled of jet fuel, and underneath it, something green and sweet and rotting a little, all at once. I stood there a second and thought, well, you wanted somewhere different, Sharon. Here it is. I'd braced myself the whole flight for the hard part, the being lost part. The nobody understands me part I'd worked myself up about at 2 a.m. And here's what actually happened, and it's the thing I most want you to hear, because it's the thing nobody tells you. It never came. The officer at immigration, young fellow, pressed uniform, looked at my passport, looked at me, and grinned. "Ma'am, you are traveling alone? First time in Davao?" Perfect English, easy as you please. I said yes, and that I'd come to see about maybe staying. And he stamped me in and said, "Then welcome home, ma'am. You will like it here. We are the friendly ones," and handed my passport back with both hands, a little bow of the head. The driver of the car, I ordered on my phone a Grab, they call it, like an Uber, talked my ear off the whole way into the city, about his kids, about the durian season coming, about how I must try the pomelo. In English, when I fumbled trying to say thank you in their own language, I'd practiced one phrase off a video, Salamat kayo, thank you very much in Bisaya, which is what they speak down there. He lit up like I'd handed him something. "Ma'am, very good. Mayong hapon sa imo," and then taught me 2 more phrases at a red light. I sat in the back of that car with my eyes stinging, and it wasn't the heat. It was that I'd spent months terrified of being locked out, mute, alone, and instead, from the first man in uniform, I was being talked to, teased even. I could be a person out loud. The loneliness I'd carried onto that plane didn't get the wall it was expecting, and it just sort of set part of itself down. Now, don't let me overdo it. It's not that every single soul speaks the King's English. There are accents, there's Taglish, half a sentence in one tongue and half in another, and plenty of folks are more at home in Bisaya, and I'm the one doing the reaching. But understood? From day one, I was understood. And I could pick up their words as a courtesy, not a survival skill. That's a whole different thing than the wall I'd feared. The city itself took some getting used to, I won't pretend. That first evening, Ada's cousin took me to the night market on Roxas Avenue, stall after stall under bare bulbs, grilled pork on sticks, whole fish, mounds of fruit, a man selling that banned fruit, the durian, which smells like somebody left gym socks in a custard and tastes, once you're brave, like heaven with a grudge. Tricycles buzzing everywhere, little motorbikes with a sidecar bolted on, the whole city's taxi, and the heat that does not quit, not even at 9 at night, sitting on you like a friendly dog that won't get off your lap. But here's where the bank woman in me woke up. Second day I bought a legal pad. Same yellow legal pad I'd have used at the branch. And I started doing what I'd done my whole life. I started counting. I went to the market myself, the wet market, and I priced it. Rice, vegetables, a whole chicken, fish they'd pulled from the sea that morning. I priced a decent lunch out, a big steaming bowl of soup with beef shank, they call it, at a little place with plastic chairs, and it cost me next to nothing. I asked Ada's cousin what a decent furnished apartment ran, a nice one, safe part of town, and I wrote it all down in 2 columns, dollars and pesos, at about 61 pesos to the dollar, which was the going rate, and I added it up the way I've added up 10,000 things. And I sat in my little rented room that night with the fan going, and I looked at the bottom line and I laughed out loud, alone, in my nightgown, at the arithmetic, because the number at the bottom of that legal pad was a life, a good, decent, whole life aircon, and all for right around $1,400 a month. Call it 86,000 pesos. And that was before I'd sharpened a single pencil. Back home, my Social Security and Harlan's little pension came to about $2,400 a month, and in Pikeville that was a careful life with a heating bill I dreaded. Here that same $2,400 was going to leave me near $1,000 a month. I didn't know what I'd do with. I'd figure that out later. For now, I just sat there, 66 years old, in the warm dark with the geckos chirping on the wall, and felt something I hadn't felt in a good while. I felt like the ledger might balance after all. The 3 weeks were nearly up before I let myself say the thing out loud. I called the little airline and I pushed my flight home back a month. Just to be sure, I told myself. Just to see the place in the daylight of an ordinary Tuesday and not the shine of the first arrival, but I think I already knew. If you want to know whether a life is real, don't price the vacation, price the Tuesday. That's the rule I gave myself once I'd decided to stop pretending this was a scouting trip and start acting like a woman who might live here. So I got methodical about it, the way the bank made me. I found an apartment and I was particular because I'd read my homework. Not a cheap ground floor room. I wanted a newer building, up off the street, built to the codes they tightened after the region learned some hard lessons. A decent furnished 1-bedroom in a safe subdivision, aircon, hot water, fiber for the internet so I could see the grandkids' faces. $350 a month, a little over 21,000 pesos. In Pikeville, that wouldn't cover the taxes and the propane. The part nobody warns you about is the front end. They call it, over here, needing 3 or 4 months of rent all at once, 2 months as your deposit, a month or 2 in advance, and then there's the flights and the pots and pans and the good pillow and the second fan and the temporary place while you're still looking. By the time I was properly moved in, the setup of the thing had run me the better part of $6,000 over and above any monthly number. I could cover it. I'd been careful my whole life, and I had the house money behind me, but I'll flag it hard for you, because the pretty videos never do. Budget the move separate from the living. They are 2 different numbers. Then I sat down with a fresh legal pad and I built the real one, line by line, the way I'd have built a loan file. Rent, $350. The electric with the aircon running honest because I run it. I'm a Kentucky woman, I don't pretend I don't, plus water and the internet and the phone, call it $150. Food, and I eat well, some of it imported, some Sunday treats, $320. Getting around, the grab and the tricycles, no car, maybe 55. A set aside for the doctor, and I'll come back to that one because it's the big one. 180, household bits and the laundry lady and phone load, 70, and a little for a life coffee out, a fiesta, a trip over to the island, 100. That came to about 1,200 and a quarter a month. Then I did the thing the hype never does. I added the costs that aren't a bill but are real as rain, the visa upkeep, amortized out, 30 a month, a go-home fund. Because I was, by God, going to see my grandbabies once a year, and I put money aside for that flight, about 110 a month, and a little sinking fund for when the aircon dies and the phone cracks, 50, another 190. Bottom line, all in, honest, right around $1,400 a month. Some months a little under, and against my $2,400 coming in, that left me the thick end of $1,000 a month as a cushion, not to get rich on, to sleep on, a buffer for when the peso jumps around, and it does jump. A swing from 60, one down toward 57, would cost me a good 7% of everything, and I keep money back against exactly that. Anybody selling you a comfortable life over here for $1,000 a month is selling you something. You can live on less. Sure, folks do live in the provinces on 7, 8, 900 a month, and God bless them. But look close, and that life's got no doctor money in it, no flight home in it, no cushion when the peso moves. That's the floor of what's possible. It is not the price of the life you'll actually want to live. I wanted the whole life. 1,400 bought it. Now, the visa. I did the first stretch the honest way as a tourist. You come in with 30 days, then you go down to the immigration office and stretch it, 29 more, then in 1, 2, 6-month pieces. Once you pass the 59-day mark, they give you a little residency card to carry. There's a report you file in January if you're in the country. And the one hard rule the old hands drill into you, which I wrote on my legal pad and underlined twice, extend a good week to 10 days early every single time, because the office goes down when it feels like, and the website was broken, is not a thing they want to hear. I ran near a year like that, testing it the way you'd test a floor before you put weight on it. And when I was sure, really sure, 67 years old, and surer of anything than I'd been in a decade, I went and did the retirement visa proper. The permanent one, run by the Retirement Authority. For someone past 50 with a pension coming in, and my Social Security cleared their bar. For that, easy, the deposit they ask you to place is $15,000, plus about $1,500 one time to process, and around $360 a year after. And here I'll be the bank teller for a minute, because somebody watching needs to hear it straight. That $15,000 is a deposit, it's yours, you get it back if you leave, but it sits in a bank over there, and the deposit insurance only guards the first 500,000 pesos of it, call it $8,000 or $9,000. Above that, you're trusting the bank, and you can only ever convert that money toward a condo you'd live in, or a long lease, never toward land, because a foreigner cannot own land in the Philippines. Not in your name, not in a girlfriend's name, not through some clever company, the ones who try that lose the lot, and there's no getting it back. I never had the itch to buy anyhow. I rent. I sleep fine. I signed the papers on a bright hot morning and walked out onto the street, a resident, more or less, of the Republic of the Philippines. 67 years old, and I stood on the curb in the sun and thought about a brochure with a smiling woman holding a paintbrush, and I laughed, and a tricycle driver laughed back because he figured we were laughing at the same thing, and in a way we were. I promised you I wouldn't sand off the parts that ache. So here they are, because if all I give you is the pretty legal pad, I'm no better than that brochure. Start with the heat, since it never stops. There is no autumn here, no first cold snap, no leaves, none of that Kentucky I grew up inside of. It is warm in January and it is warm in July, and by 2 in the afternoon the whole city goes quiet and slow, and you understand why. I have made my peace with it, mostly. But some evenings I'd give a good deal for one cold, gray, wood-smoke Pikeville morning, and I won't pretend otherwise. Then the power. It goes out. They call it a brownout. And down in that part of the country, the grid is what it is. You'll be in the middle of something, and the fan stops and the aircon dies with a sigh, and the whole street's little generators start coughing to life one after another, and you sit there in the sudden sticky quiet and sweat and wait. First few times it rattled me. Now I keep candles and a charged-up fan and a jug of water, and I've learned to just sit. Filipino time they call the general looseness of the clock, and the brownout is its cousin. Here's the one I want to be careful and honest about, because it's why I picked this city. Down here on Mindanao, the big typhoons mostly don't come. 20-some storms a year hammer this country, up north and out east, and Davao sits mostly out of their road. That's the single biggest reason I'm here, and not somewhere prettier. But, and it's a real but, you don't get to skip the danger. You just choose which one, because the whole country sits on a shelf of earthquakes, and Davao gets those. I found that out in June. There was a big one offshore, down toward the bottom of the island, a 7.8, they said after, far out under the sea. And I was standing at my own kitchen counter when the floor started to move under me. Not a jolt, a roll like the building was a boat, and something big had passed beneath it. I got myself to a doorway the way you're told, and I held on, and I said the Lord's Prayer out loud, all of it. And when it stopped, I was shaking so hard I had to sit on the floor, and then I heard the street. Everybody had come out, Nane Remy from the little store across the way, the family from the corner, the guard from the gate down the block, all of us out on the road in the warm night checking on each other. Somebody's boy went door to door. "Are you okay, Lola? Are you okay?" And a woman I barely knew put her hand on my arm and left it there. I was still trembling, and here was a whole street of near strangers making sure the old American lady on her own was accounted for. I went back in and cried a little, but it was a different kind of crying than I'd done in Pikeville. There was money trouble of the small, grinding kind, too. They've got a name for it. Western pockets, the price that quietly goes up when your face says you can afford it. For my first weeks, the tricycle fare was a little more for me. The mango was a little more for me. The man who fixed my screen door quoted me a number, and I could see him deciding it as he said it. It's not wickedness. It's just the tax on being the Kano, the American, until you learn the real price. What broke it was Nene Remy, who ran the little Sorry store across the street, the shoebox shop, with the shampoo in little hanging sachets. She took me to the market one morning and stood beside me, and the prices simply came out right. After that I knew, and after that they knew I knew. And the paperwork scare, this is the one I lie awake about even now, so I'll pass it to you as a gift. Your Social Security, over here, they still have to know you're alive. They mail you a form to prove it, a little proof of life paper, and you've got 60 days to sign it and send it back, or they switch your money off, just like that. And getting it switched back on can take 2 months. 2 months, no income, an ocean away. The first year, that form got mailed to my old Pikeville address, and Beth had it, and the Philippine Post being what it is, I did not trust it an inch. I'm a bank woman. I have watched what a missed deadline does to people, and I about came out of my skin. In the end, I learned what the old hands do. You deal with the benefits people at the embassy up in Manila directly, hand to hand. None of this trusting a form to cross the Pacific twice. I keep a U.S. bank account open and a U.S. mailing address for exactly these reasons. But I'll tell you, for a few days there, 66 years old and worried sick over a piece of paper, I felt every mile between me and home. Those were the hard weeks. Heat and dark and a shaking floor and a form, and under all of it, the plain missing of my grandbabies' faces, There was one bad stretch, maybe 4 months in, where I sat on the edge of the bed at 3 in the morning with the flights pulled up on my phone, my thumb over the button, thinking I'd made a fool's mistake and I should just go home and be managed and be quiet about it. I didn't book it. And the reason I didn't is the next chapter. It has to do with a store across the street and a church with a cool stone floor and a pack of children who needed help with their sums. The turn, when it came, didn't come with a band playing. It came with a bag of the good bread. Nene Remy, the woman who ran the little store across the street, started setting aside the fresh pan diesel for me before it sold out in the mornings. Just quietly, I'd come out at 7, the Tahoe vendor, calling down the road with his cart of warm soybean pudding, and there'd be my little paper sack on the counter, still warm, and Remy would wave off my thank you. It's a small thing. It is not a small thing. When somebody starts saving you the good bread, you have been noticed. You have been folded in. It was Remy who walked me up to San Pedro, the cathedral downtown, old and white with a curved front like a ship, and that's where the rest of my life over here got built. There's a knot of women my age at the early Mass, Filipina Lolas, grandmothers, and they took me on the way you'd take on a stray cat that finally decided to stay. Nene Remy, Tita Bering, a retired school teacher named Perla, who corrects my Bisaya and my theology in the same breath. We go to Mass. We have our coffee after. In December, we did the Simbang Gabi 9 dawn masses running up to Christmas, 4 in the morning, dark and cool, and the whole city sleepy and devout, and after each one, food, rice cakes, and hot ginger tea in the churchyard. In August, the whole city throws Katiawan, a festival of the harvest, and I stood in the crowd in the heat with Perla's hand on my shoulder and watched the floats go by covered in fruit and flowers, and I thought, I have a place to stand. I know these people. They know me. But the thing that truly did it, the thing that put my thumb away from that flight button for good, was the children. Perla mentioned, one coffee, that the little ones in the neighborhood were behind on their reading and their arithmetic, and half of them had no one at home who could help, and did I know she was pushing 72 and tired? And I heard myself say, before my brain caught up with my mouth, well, I can do sums. Can I do sums? I balanced a bank to the penny for 35 years. So now, 3 afternoons a week, there are children at my table. We do reading, and we do their multiplication, and I am strict about it, and they call me Lola Sharon, Grandmother Sharon, a name a whole street handed me that I am not owed by one drop of blood. There's a boy, Jun, who could not multiply in September and stood at my table in December and rattled off his sevens like a little machine, proud as a rooster, and I had to go in the kitchen a minute. Because back home, I was a line item, a burden to get ahead of. And over here, I am the woman who taught Jun his sevens, and there is not enough money in the world for the difference between those two things. Now, the honest flip side, because I owe you that. When you're the American on the street with a pension, people will ask, a neighbor's hospital bill, a cousin's school fees. It comes from a real place. They do it for their own kin without blinking, but you have to find your footing or you'll drown, and I've watched foreigners drown. My way, warm but firm, I don't hand out cash. I'll sit with you and organize the thing. When a neighbor's mother landed in the hospital, I didn't write a check. I helped the daughter make sense of the bill and the paperwork, and that I can do all day. Money, careful, time and skill, all yours. Say it kind, say it once, and good people respect it. Which brings me to the doctor, and I have to be straight with you here, because this is where I've watched people over here fool themselves, and it's the most expensive fooling there is. The little stuff is wonderfully cheap. I can walk into a fine private hospital, Davao Doctors, the good one downtown, see a real doctor for 900 to 1,800 pesos, $15, maybe 30, and my blood pressure pills cost a fraction of Pikeville. That part's a joy, and it's real. But don't let the cheap visit fool you about the big stuff, because the big stuff is a different world. A heart, a cancer, a bad fall, and a surgery runs into the hundreds of thousands of pesos, the millions, and a private hospital here wants proof of insurance or a cash deposit before they'll take on a case like that. No money, no insurance, no treatment. That's the hard truth under the cheap one. There's a government health plan, and as a proper retiree I pay in about 15,000 pesos a year, $240 odd. But know what it is, a fixed little sum per illness, a set case rate, not a share of your bill. A baseline, not a safety net, and the ones who mistake it for one are the ones who get hurt. So here's what I did, and it's the piece that truly costs. Over here, the good private plans mostly won't take a brand new member past 65, and I was already past it when I came. That door was shut to me. So before I ever boarded the plane, while I still could, I bought a proper international policy portable, renews for life once you're in, covers the big hospitals and, God forbid, an evacuation. Because an emergency flight to Manila or Singapore runs $15,000 to $50,000, and neither the government plan nor a local one covers a nickel of it. It's the biggest line on my legal pad, and I don't begrudge it a peso because it's the thing that lets me sleep. Behind it, I keep a chunk of the house money, ring-fenced, untouched, for whatever no policy quite covers. Insured on purpose in advance, by a woman who spent 35 years watching other people's money come apart for want of exactly this. Beth came to visit that second spring. I was 68. I'd been half afraid of it, afraid she'd see it the way I'd once feared it, her mother run off and gone strange. She got off the plane wilted and suspicious, and by the third day she was in Nene Remy's plastic chairs drinking a soda, being called ma'am by Jun, watching a whole street treat her mother like somebody who mattered. Last night, quiet. Mom, you're different here. And I said, no, baby, I'm the same. It's just that here they let me be it. She cried at the airport first time that gravy boat thing ever got said out loud between us, sideways, the way our family says the hard things. Danny's another matter. He calls. It's cordial. It'll come or it won't, and I've made my peace that I don't get to decide that one. It's been a little past 3 years now. I'm 69 years old, sitting on my little balcony, as I tell you this, up off the street the way I wanted, with the fan going and a calamansi drink sweating on the rail. Down below, somebody's murdering a love song on the video, joyful and terrible, and a basketball's going on the concrete court between the houses even though it's near dark, the ball on pavement sound I've come to love. In an hour Perla will call about tomorrow's mass. Yesterday it was Jun's mother at my door with a plate of something because it was somebody's fiesta. This is a Tuesday. Just an ordinary Tuesday. And I told you at the start price the Tuesday, not the vacation. This is what mine's worth. Let me give you the ledger one more time, plain, because I'm still a bank woman and I'll die one. I live a whole decent life here, my own place, aircon, I don't ration, good food, a doctor when I need one, a life with people in it for right around $1,400 a month, all in, against about $2,400 coming in. The cushion's real, the health policy's paid, the deposit's placed, and it's mine. I balance every month to the penny. I never did learn how not to, but I promised you the ache too, and I keep my promises, so here's what it costs still 3 years on. I miss my grandbabies with a physical hurt some mornings, a thing that sits behind the breastbone. A phone screen is not a small warm body in your lap, and I won't pretend it is. The time difference is 12-13 hours. When it's their morning, it's my night, and we catch each other in the cracks. I fly back once a year, and it is never long enough, and the leaving is always hard. There'll be another earthquake someday. I know it in my bones now. I felt the floor roll, and I don't fully relax in this life the way you might think from the pretty parts. And somewhere out ahead is the day I get truly old, truly sick, and have to decide this all over again. Stay in the place that became home, or go back toward the children who once did the arithmetic on me. I don't know the answer to that one yet. I'll be honest that I don't. Last Sunday I caught my littlest grandbaby on the video. Call it was her bedtime, my breakfast. That's how the hours fall between us, and she held the phone up too close the way small ones do. All nose and one enormous eye, and she asked me, "Mama, when are you coming home?" And I said, "Soon, baby, soon." And we both, in our way, know that soon is a word that has to stretch a terrible long way across an ocean. I sat with my coffee a good while after that call. Some mornings the miles have a real weight to them, and I've learned to just let them sit on me till they pass, the way I learned to sit through a brownout. You don't fight it, you wait, and it lifts. So no, it is not paradise. I want to be the one voice that doesn't sell you paradise. It's a real place, with heat and dark and a shaking floor and a form that can shut off your money, and a family I love and miss and haven't fully mended with. But it's mine, and I am not a burden to a single living soul. You remember I opened this with a word I couldn't set down. Burden. 2 years I carried it, and I've had 3 years now to turn it over, and here's what I finally understand about it. A burden is a thing you carry that gives you nothing back. And the trouble was never that I'd become one I hadn't. I was a healthy, careful woman with money in the bank. The trouble was that where I was, there was nothing for me to give. No sums to teach. No street to check on me when the floor moved. No bread set aside. A person with nothing to give and no one glad to see them, that person will start to feel like a weight in their own eyes, whatever the children say in the kitchen. The Philippines didn't make me lighter. It gave me something to carry that carries me back. That's the whole trick of it. That's the thing worth crossing an ocean for at 69. If you're sitting where I sat with a word in your ear you can't put down, and a body that still works, and a suspicion that the good years aren't required to be spent being managed, then I hope you heard the honest version of this from me. The gravy boat and the earthquake both. Before I let you go, one last thing, and then I'll leave you be. If any piece of this landed, if you've got that same quiet itch I had, wondering whether the numbers could ever work for somebody like you, there's a free tool down in the description that's worth a few minutes of your time. I didn't make it, and I'm not selling you one single thing. It's an honest self-check, the kind that's as willing to talk you out of this as into it, and it should be in a little worksheet where you run your own real numbers, city by city, the careful way I ran mine on my yellow legal pad. It costs you nothing. And if it looks you in the eye and tells you to stay right where you are, well, that's an honest answer too, and worth knowing. That's all I've got. Go on and count your own rows, and take care of yourself out there.